It is better to be feared than loved if you cannot be both. These words from Niccolò Machiavelli have echoed through centuries, often misunderstood, frequently twisted, but always remembered. And if we look around today at the world of politics, leadership, and power, we may ask ourselves a troubling question. Why is it that so often the most foolish, the most incompetent, the least wise individuals manage to claw their way into positions of immense authority? Why do we find ourselves ruled not by the most capable, but by those who seem blind, arrogant, or even laughably unqualified? To answer this question, we must return to Machiavelli, not as the caricature of ruthless manipulation that many assume him to be, but as the sharp-eyed observer of human nature and political survival that he truly was. Machiavelli understood something profound. Power does not necessarily reward wisdom, virtue, or intelligence. Power rewards those who understand appearances, manipulation, and the art of survival. And herein lies the paradox. The most foolish people often appear bold, unafraid, and willing to say or do what others will not. Their lack of restraint, their ignorance of nuance, and their shameless pursuit of self-interest give them an odd advantage in a world where hesitation is punished and humility is mistaken for weakness. The wise, meanwhile, weigh their words, consider consequences, and hesitate in the face of moral dilemmas. But history, as Machiavelli reminds us, rarely crowns the cautious thinker. It crowns the reckless who appear decisive, the loud who drown out the quiet, the foolish who present themselves as fearless. Consider how Machiavelli describes the prince, not as an angel, not as a philosopher, but as someone who must learn how to use both the fox and the lion. The fox deceives, the lion intimidates. And what of wisdom? Wisdom is useful, yes, but only if it does not interfere with the brutal necessities of ruling. A wise man may see the complexities of justice, fairness, or diplomacy, but a foolish ruler, unburdened by subtlety, may bulldoze his way to power simply by being audacious enough to claim it. Machiavelli would have seen this pattern not as an accident, but as an inevitability of human societies. The crowd, after all, prefers the spectacle of strength over the quiet assurance of competence. When we call someone foolish, we usually mean they lack depth, foresight, or intelligence. Yet in politics, what looks like foolishness in one realm can be a strange form of effectiveness in another. A foolish leader may oversimplify complex issues into slogans and catchphrases, and instead of being dismissed, they are celebrated for their honesty or authenticity. A foolish leader may blurt out outrageous claims, and instead of losing credibility, they dominate attention and control the narrative. The wise, on the other hand, are drowned out because wisdom is rarely entertaining, rarely simple, and rarely aggressive enough to win the public's obsession. Machiavelli knew that appearances matter more than reality. He warned that a prince must seem virtuous, even if he is not, because people judge with their eyes, not their hearts. And what is foolishness, if not a performance of boldness without reflection? The masses, frustrated by complexities, gravitate toward leaders who make the world seem simple. The foolish man who pretends to have all the answers gains applause, while the wise man who admits uncertainty loses trust. In this way, foolishness becomes a mask that people willingly accept because it comforts them more than truth ever could. History is littered with examples of leaders who fit this mold. They are remembered not for their insight, but for their bluster, not for their subtlety, but for their showmanship. The crowd may laugh at them, mock them, even privately doubt them. Yet somehow they are the ones who climb to the top of the pyramid. Machiavelli would not have been surprised. He would have reminded us that people prefer a strong illusion to a weak truth, and that power is not about being good. It is about surviving, dominating, and controlling the story. Perhaps the deepest irony is this. The foolish ruler is often too blind to his own incompetence to be crippled by self-doubt. The wise man worries, but the fool acts. The wise man hesitates, but the fool charges forward. And in politics, as in war, action often trumps hesitation, no matter how misguided it may be. Machiavelli would say that fortune favors the bold, and boldness often disguises itself in the costume of foolishness. But should we simply accept this? Should we shrug and conclude that foolishness will always rise to power? Not quite. Machiavelli himself never glorified foolishness. He exposed the mechanics of power so that those who sought it could prepare themselves. His writings were less a celebration of corruption and more a manual for survival. And survival requires recognizing that the game is rigged in favor of appearance, audacity, and spectacle. If we do not understand this, we leave the stage open for the fools to dominate. And here lies the challenge for us today. If we are to resist the rise of foolishness, we must first admit why it is so effective. We must recognize that the world rewards simplicity, that the crowd rewards entertainment, and that fear and desire drive people far more than reason. The wise must learn, as Machiavelli advised, to wear the mask of boldness without surrendering their intelligence. They must learn not only to be good, but to appear strong, decisive, and fearless, even when they are cautious, thoughtful, and measured. For if they do not, they will always be outshouted, outmaneuvered, and outvoted by the fools who mistake recklessness for strength. Machiavelli's brilliance lies in his unflinching honesty about human nature. He stripped away the illusions that societies cling to and revealed the mechanics of power at its core. And in doing so, he explained why the foolish so often rise, not because they are secretly clever, but because power itself is an arena where shamelessness often beats subtlety, where noise beats wisdom, and where appearance beats truth. And yet there is something even darker hidden beneath Machiavelli's insight. It is not only that foolish people rise to power, it is that societies often invite them in. The crowd, tired of complexity, weary of the gray areas of truth, and desperate for certainty, longs for leaders who speak in absolutes. The fool does not hesitate to provide this. He declares, he promises, he swears that he alone has the answer. And the masses, frightened and uncertain, clutch onto his words like a drowning man grabs a piece of driftwood. The wise leader, meanwhile, dares to explain the truth, that life is complicated, that solutions are never perfect, that sacrifice and compromise are necessary. And so, paradoxically, wisdom sounds weak, while foolishness sounds strong. This is the cruel irony that Machiavelli understood. Politics is not about truth, it is about perception. Think of how the stage of power is set. In every age, whether in the republics of Machiavelli's Italy or the democracies of today, the competition for power is not one in silence or reasoned discussion. It is one in spectacle. The people do not always see the quiet administrator who governs well. They see the showman, the performer, the one who can command attention and dominate the stage. Foolish leaders, unencumbered by doubt, thrive in this theater. They speak with fire even when they lack substance. They thrive on chaos because chaos hides their lack of competence. And in this theater of politics, as Machiavelli wrote, it is not necessary to be truly virtuous. It is only necessary to appear virtuous. But let us not confuse foolishness with harmlessness. A foolish ruler is not merely a clown on a stage. He can be a danger to the state because his ignorance mixed with power creates disaster. Yet even as he stumbles, he can survive because power is not about being right. It is about staying in control. Machiavelli would remind us that people will forgive many mistakes if they still believe their leader is strong. They will tolerate failure if they were told it is victory. They will endure hardship if they are convinced it is someone else's fault. The fool in power knows this instinctively. He may not understand governance, but he understands blame. He shifts it, projects it, weaponizes it. And so he stays afloat even as the ship begins to sink. And what of the wise? Where are they when the fools reign? Too often they remain in the shadows, their voices drowned by noise, their warnings dismissed as pessimism. History has seen countless examples of advisors, philosophers, and thinkers ignored until it was too late. Machiavelli himself, once a statesman, was cast aside and forced into exile when Florence fell under new rulers. He knew firsthand that wisdom often earns suspicion, while foolishness, cloaked in bravado, earns power. This was not just theory for him, it was experience. And so in his book, The Prince, he does not flatter us with ideals. He confronts us with reality. Power is a brutal game, and it does not reward the best, it rewards the bold. Still, there is a faint hope hidden in his message. Machiavelli does not say that only fools rise. He says that those who wish to rule must understand the game. If wisdom learns to disguise itself as decisiveness, if intelligence learns to wear the mask of boldness, then perhaps the wise can compete with the fools. For power, after all, is not won by being good. It is won by appearing effective. The challenge is whether the wise can stomach this compromise. Can the thinker learn to shout? Can the cautious learn to strike? Can the wise leader learn to perform as well as govern? If not, the stage will always belong to the reckless. And perhaps this is where the responsibility shifts, not only to leaders, but to the people themselves. If the masses reward foolishness, then foolishness will continue to rise. If the masses mistake simplicity for truth, then they will always be seduced by the loudest voices. Machiavelli forces us to look in the mirror and ask, do we want wisdom or do we want comfort? Do we want leaders who tell us the hard truths, or do we want those who flatter our fears and feed our illusions? The answer to that question decides who rules us. Not fate, not fortune, but our own appetites. It is easy to blame the fool in power. It is harder to admit that he rules because we placed him there, because we preferred the illusion of strength to the quiet burden of truth. Machiavelli would smirk at our outrage. He would remind us that human beings have not changed in 500 years. We are still dazzled by appearances, still seduced by the bold, still afraid of complexity. And so the cycle repeats. The wise advise, the fools ascend, and history groans under the weight of their mistakes. And yet to end here would be too bleak. For Machiavelli was not only a cynic, he was a realist. And realism is the first step toward change. If we can accept that foolishness rises because we reward it, then we can also change what we reward. If we can learn to admire thoughtfulness as much as boldness, if we can teach ourselves to value truth over spectacle, then perhaps the fools will not always dominate. It is not easy. It requires discipline, education, and a willingness to see through the glitter of performance. But without this, we remain trapped in the same cycle Machiavelli described centuries ago. So why do the most foolish people end up in power? Because power is a stage, and the fool plays the role with reckless energy, while the wise hesitate backstage. Because people crave certainty more than truth, noise more than silence, strength more than thought. Because appearances rule the world, and the fool has mastered appearances better than the philosopher ever could. Machiavelli knew this. He did not celebrate it, but he revealed it, holding up a mirror so that we could see our own complicity in the rise of fools. The question now is whether we will keep looking into that mirror, or whether we will once again turn away, laugh at the clown on the stage, and then hand him the crown. For as long as we prefer illusions to reality, the fool will reign, not by accident, but by design. And Machiavelli's warning will continue to echo. Power is not about being wise, it is about being bold. And if the wise refuse to learn boldness, then the stage will always belong to the foolish.